Okay, so we have a 7-lead cable we got for connecting the outside of the case, which will have a 6-pin Neutrik connector, and on the back we'll have 6 connectors for 6 speakers plus the ground, going into 3 amps, which will be on the bottom plate of the speaker, and they have an 1/8" jack already in them, and that way we will have a better, more modular design, so when we need to disassemble it and fix it, it's going to be easier to fix. So in essence, you really need only 6 leads. We actually have cut one off. There's a little brown one down here that we got rid of, and you need to decide how to name these. We are using just rainbow colors, so we're starting with red and orange being our first 1 and 2, red being left, orange being right, then yellow and green next in row, which will be again left and right, and then blue and black being the last 2. For each of those we need a ground, so instead of using that 7th lead, which we would need to then split later down the road, what we're basically doing is we're taking the actual surrounding ground, which is actually like a shield on the cable, and we're using that as our ground because it's easier to split into 3 pieces and then branch it off into 3 of these connectors. So I'll have to now kind of bend these guys this way to make it easier to thread as well as to solder. So now we have them braided, so we'll bunch them up together so we know which ones goes with which. The ground really doesn't matter because they all commonly meet down here and go together. But that end is for right now done, so we'll focus on the other end, which is a little bit more complicated, and that is soldering these guys together. So what we need to do is the black will be the center, so we'll start with the center one because that's the channel 6. The way how these are organized is because they're actually labeled on both ends. You can kind of barely see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and center 6. Obviously when you flip it around it goes counterclockwise then. But 6 is basically the top of the speaker, and then we're mirroring the rest as if this was the control panel. So if this was the speaker like this, that ends up being 6, and then you get the rest of them around in a circle. So because the 6 is our 6th channel, we'll actually do that one first. Plug it right in the center. Apply some solder. Apply it onto the actual connector 2 to make it sticky. And then we'll plug the guy in there. So we got the top side of it done, now we have to just do the rest of it. It's strong enough, no hairs are sticking out, and it's pretty tight. Now of course this will not be the weight bearing thing, we'll later on gunk it up with the hot glue because the solder is not to be used generally as the weight bearing thing. So then we proceed with the rest of the cables all around the perimeter. Okay. So now we've soldered all the 6 connectors except for the ground, and we followed again the same numbering. So there's a little tiny imprint next to each of the connectors saying which channel that is. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 6 in the center. And so we again follow the rainbow colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and black. When soldering these, you want to keep the lead as far inside of the connector as possible so it doesn't short out. So the last thing we want to do on this end before we're done is taking the ground, running it through here. You may want to thin it out for that to be easier to do, but whatever you do, you want to run it through the hole just to give it some structural integrity. You also want to give it some kind of insulation. So we have applied some heat on the insulator here, so even though it's translucent, it's still insulating from the other leads. And then we're going to just apply some solder here right at the end. Now we've soldered the ground, it's insulated for the most part until we get this far. And now what we're going to do to give it some structural integrity, we'll just gunk it up with hot glue. Alright. So I'll be very generous with it, just because I want to make sure that the The structural integrity of this stuff is relying upon the wire itself rather than soldering points. And I would probably put some here as well to prevent from the insulation from moving any more wire upwards and exposing the ground wire.